Jeremy Clarkson has driven almost every legendary engine on the planet: Ferraris, Bugattis, McLarens. But out of all of them, he says only 3 ever earned his real respect. And the one he ranks as number 1 wasn't even built by a car company. What actually built it is going to surprise you. The critic who never grades on a curve. Before we get into the engines themselves, you need to understand how Clarkson actually thinks about a car. He is not the guy who gets excited about leather seats or a fancy infotainment screen. He built an entire career out of being brutally honest about machines that everybody else was too polite to criticize. He has torched supercars on international television for having numb steering. He has mocked million-dollar hypercars for feeling soulless. He has an entire highlight reel of walking away from cars that cost more than most houses and shrugging like he just ate a mediocre sandwich. So when Clarkson actually stops, when he gets out of a car and genuinely struggles to find something bad to say about the engine underneath him, that is not a small thing. That is a man who has driven it all, finally running out of complaints. And across everything he has tested, only 3 engines ever earned that kind of reaction from him. 2 of them are wrapped in some of the most iconic sports cars ever built. The third one is hiding in a place almost nobody expects, built by a company most people don't even associate with cars at all. Let's start with the one that reminded him exactly why naturally aspirated engines still mattered, even after the world moved on to turbos. Crown number 3, the last great scream. The third engine on this list is the Ferrari F136, specifically the high-revving 4.5-liter version that powered the Ferrari 458 Italia. If you know anything about Ferrari, you know the F136 family is legendary in its own right. It was co-developed with Maserati, it powered everything from the F430 to the California, and by the time it reached its final form in the 458, it had been sharpened into one of the most complete, naturally aspirated V8s ever built. This was not a small engine doing a small job. It made 562 horsepower from just 4.5 liters without a single turbocharger bolted to it. That works out to roughly 125 horsepower per liter, a number that sounded almost fictional back when it launched, and honestly still sounds impressive today in a world of forced induction everything. Clarkson has spent decades praising Ferrari's engine department, and this particular V8 sat right at the top of his list of naturally aspirated masterpieces, right alongside his long-running love affair with earlier Ferrari flat-plane V8s going all the way back to the F355. He has openly called Ferrari's V8 program some of the finest engine engineering on the planet, and the F136 in its final form was the culmination of everything that program had learned. Here's why this engine earns its place on a list about perfection, and it comes down to one word that gets thrown around too casually in car reviews: linearity. The F136 in the 458 revved to 9,000 revolutions per minute. Let that number sink in for a second. Most road car engines are winding down and looking for a gear change by 6,500 or 7,000 revolutions per minute. This engine was just getting started at that point. It pulled hard, cleanly, and predictably all the way to a red line that most people associate with a MotoGP bike, not a road-legal Ferrari. That flat-plane crankshaft, the same design philosophy Ferrari has used since the 1970s, gave the engine a razor-sharp throttle response and a soundtrack that genuinely sounds like it's tearing fabric at high RPM. There was no turbo lag to manage because there was no turbo at all. What you put into the throttle pedal, you got back instantly, with zero delay and zero interpretation from a computer trying to smooth things out for you. Clarkson has talked at length about how a great engine should feel like an extension of your own right foot, not a negotiation with a piece of machinery. The F136 was exactly that. It didn't need boost to build. It didn't need a turbo to spool. There was no lag, no waiting, no drama between your intention and the engine's response. You asked for power, and the F136 simply gave it to you immediately, right up until that screaming 9,000 RPM ceiling. This is part of why so many enthusiasts, Clarkson included, consider the 458 Italia's engine to be one of the last great naturally aspirated V8s, before the entire industry pivoted to turbocharging for emissions and fuel economy reasons. It represents a genuine high point, an engine built purely to be as good as it could possibly be, with almost no compromise for anything else. That is the kind of honesty in engineering that earns a place on any serious list of great engines, and it's exactly the kind of honesty Clarkson respects the most. Crown number 2, the engine that was never supposed to be in a road car. If the Ferrari F-136 impressed Clarkson because of what it achieved within its intended purpose, the second engine on this list impressed him because it was never really designed for that purpose at all. This is the BMW S72, a 6.1-liter naturally aspirated V12 that BMW built specifically for one car and one car only, the McLaren F1. And if you know anything about the McLaren F1, you know this car is not just another supercar. Many enthusiasts, journalists, and engineers consider it the greatest driving machine ever built, and Clarkson himself has repeatedly named the F1 as his personal favorite car of all time, across every single vehicle he has ever driven in his entire career. That is an enormous statement from a man who has driven literally thousands of cars for a living. The story behind this engine is almost as remarkable as the engine itself. Gordon Murray, the legendary designer behind the McLaren F1, originally wanted a Honda V10 or V12 for the car. When those negotiations fell apart, BMW's motorsport division, BMW M, stepped in and agreed to build a completely bespoke engine to Murray's exact specifications. And Murray's specifications were brutal. He wanted a naturally aspirated engine with no turbo lag whatsoever. He wanted it to weigh under 250 kilograms. And he wanted at least 550 horsepower. BMW's engineers actually exceeded every single one of those targets, delivering an engine that weighed just 266 kilograms and produced 627 horsepower, all without a turbocharger in sight. This is where the engineering gets genuinely special, and it's exactly the kind of detail Clarkson loves to talk about on camera. The S70/2 used individual throttle bodies for each of its 12 cylinders, meaning every single cylinder got its own dedicated air intake instead of sharing one central throttle body like most engines of the era. That gave the engine an almost telepathic connection to the driver's right foot. Push the pedal down, and the response was instant and mechanical, with none of the lag or hesitation you'd get from a forced induction setup trying to catch up. BMW even lined the engine bay with real gold foil, because gold is one of the best natural reflectors of heat, and Murray wanted to protect the carbon fiber tub from the tremendous heat this V12 produced. That is the level of obsessive engineering we're talking about here. An engine bay lined in actual gold just to keep the chassis around it from cooking. Clarkson has talked about driving the McLaren F1 as one of the defining experiences of his entire career, and the engine is a massive part of why. It revved to 7,500 revolutions per minute with a sound that has been described by drivers as somewhere between a fighter jet and a symphony. It pulled with a ferocity that felt completely at odds with how smooth and civilized it sounded doing it. And in 1998, a modified version of this exact engine, built without a rev limiter, helped push the McLaren F1 to a genuine top speed of 240.1 miles per hour, a naturally aspirated production car record that stood unbeaten for years afterward, and one that many enthusiasts still consider one of the most remarkable achievements in automotive history, given that it was done with zero turbocharging and zero aerodynamic assistance beyond what Murray had already built into the shape. This is exactly the kind of engineering integrity that earns Clarkson's respect. BMW didn't build a compromise. They didn't build something close enough to Murray's demands. They built precisely what he asked for, and then quietly beat every single target along the way. For a man who has spent his career calling out half-hearted engineering on television, that kind of total commitment to a brief is rare, and it's exactly why the S70/2 sits at number 2 on this list. Now, before we get to the number 1 engine on this list, I want you to do something for me. If you're the kind of person who genuinely loves the sound of a naturally aspirated engine winding out past 8,000 revolutions per minute, hit that like button right now before you keep watching. It genuinely helps videos like this one reach more people who care about this stuff as much as we do. And if you haven't already, subscribe and tap that notification bell, because we've got a lot more of these deep dives into the greatest engines and machines ever built heading your way. Drop a comment down below and tell me which engine you think deserves to be on a list like this, and tell me why. We read every single one of them, and honestly, some of the best engines we've ever covered on this channel came directly from viewer suggestions in the comments. All right, let's get into the engine that Clarkson himself has called one of the finest pieces of engineering he has ever experienced behind the wheel of a road car. Crown number 1. The engine built by a piano and motorcycle company. The number 1 engine on this list might be the most surprising entry of the entire video, because it wasn't built by Ferrari, and it wasn't built by a legendary German motorsport division. It was co-developed by Yamaha, a company most people associate with motorcycles, pianos, and outboard boat motors, working alongside Toyota's Lexus division to create the 4.8-liter V10 found inside the Lexus LFA. Yes, you heard that right. One of the most celebrated engines in modern automotive history came from the same company that makes your grandmother's living room piano. The Lexus LFA was a project that took an almost absurd amount of time and money to develop. Toyota spent roughly a decade and reportedly over $1 billion developing this car, and a huge portion of that investment went directly into the engine. Yamaha wasn't just consulted on this project. Their engineers were embedded directly with Toyota's team, and they were given one of the strangest and most specific briefs in automotive history. Make this engine sound perfect. Not just powerful, not just fast revving. Perfect, as in musically, acoustically perfect, in a way that would genuinely move the person sitting behind the wheel on an emotional level. And they didn't just guess at what that meant. Yamaha's engineers, many of whom had backgrounds building world-class musical instruments and understood acoustics on a level most engine builders never even think about, actually worked with a former conductor from the London Symphony Orchestra to help shape and tune the engine's exhaust note. Think about how insane that is for a second. A production car engine, tuned in collaboration with an orchestral conductor, treating the intake and exhaust system less like plumbing and more like the body of a musical instrument. That is not something Ferrari has ever done. That is not something BMW has ever done. That is a completely unique approach to engine building that has never really been replicated before or since. The results back up every bit of that obsession. This naturally aspirated 4.8-liter V10 produced 553 horsepower and could rev from idle to its 9,000 RPM redline in just 0.6 of a second. A response time so fast that Toyota actually had to replace the traditional analog tachometer with a digital one because a standard needle physically could not move fast enough to keep up with how quickly this engine could rev. Read that again. The engine revved faster than a mechanical gauge could physically display. That single detail tells you everything about the level of engineering obsession baked into this thing. Clarkson drove the Lexus LFA on top gear and came away genuinely stunned by it, praising the engine's sound and its responsiveness in terms he rarely used for anything outside of the most legendary Italian supercars. He has talked about how the LFA's V10 didn't just sound aggressive, it sounded intentional, like every single component from the intake to the exhaust tip had been tuned by someone who understood music as much as they understood metallurgy. That is an incredibly rare compliment, especially from a man who spent years mocking Japanese sports cars for feeling clinical or overly digital. The LFA's engine broke through that skepticism entirely, and it did it by treating engineering and artistry as the exact same discipline instead of two separate things fighting for space under the hood. This is exactly why the Yamaha-designed V10 sits at number 1 on Clarkson's list, above two legendary European engines that most people would assume are untouchable. It wasn't just powerful, it wasn't just fast revving. It was an engine built with the same obsessive attention to emotional detail that goes into building a world-class musical instrument. And it proved that the most important engineering discipline is not always about horsepower figures or torque curves. Sometimes it's about understanding exactly how a machine should make a human being feel. Bringing it back together. So there you have it. 3 completely different engines, 3 completely different philosophies, and one man who has driven practically everything on 4 wheels, still stopping to genuinely praise all 3 of them. The Ferrari F136 earned its spot through pure naturally aspirated honesty, an engine that gave you exactly what you asked for the instant you asked for it, all the way to a screaming 9,000 RPM redline, with none of the lag or hesitation that comes with a turbocharger doing the thinking for you. The BMW S72 earned its spot by exceeding an impossible brief with zero compromise, building an engine so obsessively engineered that BMW lined its bay in actual gold just to protect the car around it, and then quietly went on to help set a naturally aspirated top speed record that stood unbeaten for years. And the Yamaha V10 earned its spot by proving that engineering and art are not 2 separate disciplines, but the exact same pursuit, tuned by a former orchestral conductor to make a car engine sound less like machinery and more like music, and revving so fast that a standard gauge couldn't physically keep up with it. Remember how we opened this video? We told you the engine Clarkson ranked number 1 wasn't even built by a car company, and that what actually built it was going to surprise you. Now you know exactly why. It was a piano and motorcycle company that understood something most car manufacturers never bothered to consider. That is the answer to the bigger question we opened with too. What does it take to impress a man who has driven it all? Not horsepower alone, not a badge on the hood. It takes total, uncompromising commitment to doing one job as close to perfectly as physically possible, no matter how unconventional the path to get there looks. If this video taught you something new about engines you thought you already knew everything about, that is exactly what this channel is here for. We dig past the spec sheets and the marketing copy to find the real engineering stories that most car channels never bother to tell. If you want more of these deep dives into the greatest engines, the strangest engineering stories, and the machines that genuinely changed the automotive world, make sure you are subscribed, because we have a lot more of these coming. Drop a comment down below and let us know which engine you think deserves a spot on a list like this one, and don't be shy about making your case. Some of our best video ideas have come straight from comments just like the ones you're about to leave. Give this video a like if you made it all the way to the end. It genuinely helps us keep making content like this and get it in front of more people who love cars as much as you do. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one.